Welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and inside this game review and gameplay video, I'm excited to be checking out on Tabletop Simulator Dante Inferno. And the reason that I've selected Tabletop Simulator is because this is where the most recent version of Dante Inferno currently exists. And so this will give you the best idea as to how this game currently flows and operates, and the most recent updates as well. There are prototypes out there in the wild, but they are from previous iteration and versions. So we're going to take things from current day forward. And as you can see in the bottom right hand corner, the version is 0.5.1, and this is the version that's actually been released out into the wild for anybody to actually try on Tabletop Simulator. So I'll put a link to that in the pinned comment and video description. After you watch this video, you'll have a good idea as to how it goes, and then you can actually give it a shot for yourself. So after watching this video, as well as playing Dante Inferno on Tabletop Simulator, you'll be ready to make a decision when the campaign launches for February 20th. And links for that, if you want to follow along in advance, are in the pinned comment and video description. At this point, we're going to dive into the introduction for the game. We'll find out more about what this game is all about. And then I'm going to take you through the two major phases of the game. We have the Chronicle phase to start us off, and then we get into the Confrontation phase after that. Dante Inferno is a cooperative boss battler and narrative game for 1 to 4 players. Players are going to gather in a caravan to explore a world inspired by the book, The Divine Comedy by the Italian poet Dante. They will discover places, characters, and events immortalized in the masterpiece. Through 9 chapters, one dedicated to each circle of the Inferno, the players will experience an original narrative that takes place at the dawn of the 16th century and is intertwined with the script of the author's first trip. This time, Dante takes on the role of a mentor and will guide the adventurers, leading them through a journey that begins with an audacious knight's sacrilege. Each chapter is divided into 3 phases, one focused on the narrative development of that cycle, the Chronicle, another for the tactical combat between the players and the Inferno's most famous inhabitants, and that's the Confrontation, and the last one consisting of the steps that tie these mechanics together and make the transition from one playstyle to the other. Exploration of the Inferno will be rich, intriguing, and true to the original work, prompting players to make meaningful choices that will determine the course of their story. These choices will lead them to acquire mythological relics, provide them with special objectives in battle, and tell the stories of the regions and inhabitants of the Inferno and the characters they are playing. Such decisions will have repercussions on the outcome of the campaign and challenge the characters to question their convictions, because in order to prevail in the land of eternal suffering, saints also need to get their hands dirty. When playing Dante Inferno, there are 2 modes of play. You have quick combat and campaign play. So you can choose which one you want to do. You can actually pause the screen if you want to read through this to find a little bit more. But again, remember, everything here is prototype. Structure of things and the wording of things may change as we go along. So for now, what we're going to do is dive right into the Chronicle phase, because I want to show you how the beginning of things start as you begin your journey in Dante Inferno. So let's flip over to that page. We'll read a bit about the Chronicle phase, and I'll actually show you how it operates. Within part 1, the Chronicle phase, in the rulebook, it says the Chronicle phase is the moment in the game when the champions explore the Inferno through a journey based on the interaction between narrative description and decision making. And it goes into bullet points going over this, but we're going to talk a lot about this when we actually flow through it. So I'll leave this for you to read if you wish. We're going to dive into the narrative to kick things off and actually get into the Chronicle phase. Besides the rulebook, you're also going to have the Book of Chronicles in the final physical version, and this Book of Chronicles is going to provide you with narrative, branching pathways, decisions, of course, that cause branching pathways, all of it housed inside of this book. You're going to see as we go into it, it's got a full table of contents here, and it does credit all the different individuals currently. Again, it's all work in progress, so nothing is perfectly finalized yet, but we're going to focus right here quickly on the setup. Now, the setup for this one has already been totally completed. If you dive into this particular TTS mod, it'll already be like this from the very beginning, so you won't actually have to set this up yourself, but these are the steps for the physical version when that releases. And then we actually get into the prologue itself, which I'm going to read right now. Another day in paradise. Our story begins with the image of Dante, the Florentine poet, wandering through a springtime field. He has been a resident of paradise for almost 2 centuries now, and life in fullness is complete. The poet makes use of his free time to write the verses of what will be his new masterpiece, the journey of his life from the cradle to the grave, sung in terza rima. He has spent decades on this task, but his work is about to take a hiatus. Just ahead, Archangel Gabriel awaits. The messenger is brief and apocalyptic. The greatest transgression since original sin has been committed. A brotherhood of knights called the Order has invaded the Inferno, motivated to achieve salvation through force. The horrors of the infernal lands should be enough to dissuade any mortal from this endeavor. However, these soldiers' belief in the sanctity of their leader gives them the fervor they need to endure the unbearable. The saints are appalled and fearful of divine punishment that may follow this sacrilege. They turn to Dante because such an army will need to be prevented by other earthly forces, since Minos, the infernal judge and guardian, has allowed them to enter willingly. What these men are doing will not only change the world, but the destiny of all creation. As you go through the Chronicle book, you're going to see illustrations throughout it to show you exactly what to do the first time through. So this is going to be very helpful in learning things. So in your first game, you're going to go ahead and place one limbo card from the top of the deck. It's going to be the number 1 limbo card and place it into this location right here. And it states right here, place the region card 001 Dark Forest in position C1 and then inspect it. So this card right here comes off the top of the deck and lands right here. And this is the Dark Forest. Now, in order to inspect this, you're simply going to go to the book itself and you're going to flip to the page that actually lines up with the card that you've got. So there you are. 4 strangers lost in a dark forest halfway through your lives. A turmoil of concerns revolves in your hearts and minds as you advance through the woods, where everything seems new and dangerous. You barely know who you are and you have no idea how you got here, but you know you need to move forward. Smelling the fear that spreads like perfume, a symphony of howls, roars, and growls announces the arrival of the predators. A panther, a lion, and a wolf jump in the way, intercepted by the 3 beasts. You have no choice but to face them. However, only one of the champions is able to control their fear and chooses an opponent. Who will be the one who dares to take a step forward? Now, when you're playing solo, you're the one that gets to control this in every aspect all the time. So that's the great news. I get to make this choice. So I'm going to choose either to face the wolf, to face the panther, to face the lion, or to face the lion down here. And you'll see there is brackets for each of these. They did correspond to certain character classes within the game, but I believe in the final version, these will be adjusted, potentially removed. That's still in place and still being discussed. But I think for me, I'm going to go ahead and face the wolf. So if I choose to do this, I'm going to go ahead and look for this inside this Chronicle book, and it happens to be right here. The outlaw is a cunning man. Hardened by the difficult choices he has made in life, he has learned not to start a fight that he cannot win, and therefore he decides to attack the wolf, so thin that she appears to be just skin and bones. The man prepares his bow, takes a deep breath, gets his arm in position, and pulls the arrow. He targets the perfect spot between the predator's eyes, but holds his shot. He remembers a terrible time when he too had been the target. Now, at this point, what we're going to do is what's called an ordeal inside the game. The caravan, which is our party, is going to endure an ordeal, and it's going to be of aggressiveness, prowess, and willpower. These are going to be key as they tie to major resources inside the game, and tokens I will show you in just a moment, and it's key to remember difficulty 3. Now, aggressiveness, prowess, and willpower are all attributes within the game. They're all tracked using tokens. You can see a sheet about it right here in the rulebook, and we'll actually go ahead and just zoom in on these. So this is aggressiveness, this one here is willpower, and this one here is prowess. You can actually have an unlimited amount of each of these in terms of resources, or you can actually burn out completely and have none of a particular one. But you'll notice when we actually looked at the book and it told us that the caravan endures an ordeal of aggressiveness, prowess, and willpower, it's telling us which ones we can actually use as attribute tokens during this ordeal. So I've got an ordeal all set up to show you guys. So basically, you're going to go ahead and shuffle the Arcana deck, make sure that it's all ready to go. You're going to draw 5 cards up, which I've already done, and you're going to place in these watermarked areas here in TTS. And then you're also going to go for the Diligence deck and the Province deck. You're going to draw cards based on the difficulty level of the ordeal, which you can see by looking up here. It says difficulty 3, so that means 3 cards coming from each of these decks down here, which we'll be using in order to resolve the Arcana cards. So we're going to go ahead and flip all these over so you can actually see what we have. Not that one. And we're going to take a look. So we got numbers across each of these in the top left-hand corner. That is what you need to focus on. Don't worry so much about what's going on down here in the bottom half of the card at all. We'll talk more about that later on, how that potentially ties in ripple effects and stuff like that. But in terms of right now, we're just trying to solve the ordeal by essentially equaling a value in the top left-hand corner based on the difficulty level of the ordeal. So the difficulty level is 3, so we need to cover 3 of these cards. To do that, you're going to use your cards down below here, and you have to use 1 of one color, 1 of the other color, and you then sum the numbers together or subtract them in order to equal a value in the top left-hand corner up top. So you can obviously take a look across all the numbers that you have and try to figure out how you can go ahead and match up cards to equal certain numbers, and so long as you cover 3 of them in this case at a difficulty 3, you succeed at the ordeal. If you do not, you fail, and you can actually choose to not push any further ahead. You can choose to just fail if you wish, But of course, the ripple effects of failing are not so great. In other words, you may fail if you don't have the right number combinations here and you don't use any of the available ways to mitigate these cards, which I'll get into in a second. So let's actually try to see if we can solve some of these. So we have a 3 here. That shouldn't be too difficult. We could look at like an 8, for instance, and a 5. So 8 take away 5 using one of each card type equals 3. So that one is covered. Now the 10 here gets a little bit more troublesome, but maybe not, because we have a 7 and a 3. So we're good there. And then we actually look here and we've got a 4 and a 7. So we actually happen to have exactly what we need to solve 3 of these cards just like that. And so we're going to succeed at this ordeal. Now let's talk about a situation where maybe we had a card combination that wouldn't allow us to actually get that third one. What options do we have? Inside the rulebook, we have 2 ways to mitigate the cards that we deal with in an ordeal to try to be successful. We already know we're successful in this ordeal already, so I'll be taking that path in just a moment, but let's talk about these 2. So first off, let's say we only got 2 of the 3 based on needing 3 difficulty to succeed in ordeal, and we needed to try to find a way to succeed. Well, we could try discarding an attribute token so long as that attribute is actually mentioned in the one we're going after. So aggressiveness, prowess, and willpower are all mentioned, so all 3 of those tokens we have are usable to discard in order to do this. And what you get to do is discard any number of Arcana cards to the bottom of the Arcana deck and then draw from the top to replenish. In other words, you get to get rid of some values that you may not be able to obtain, maybe based on the values being too high, and maybe you have low card values. It's worth mentioning in the red and blue decks that they run from 3 to 10 in each of them. So if you get a card that's like 18, 19, 20, and you don't have a 10 in there, you're probably not going to see that that value get hit, right? So there's certain situations where you might need to do this. Now, another option you have at your disposal, if you can't just adjust the Arcana cards and you maybe don't have the attribute tokens available that are being called on for the ordeal to actually discard, is you can go down here to offering Arcana. And if you choose to do this, you're selecting one of the Arcana cards and you're offering it up. And it's actually going to go to the Caravan board slot, which is right here. And it's going to get stored because when you go to the Confrontation phase later on, that card is going to be used against you. It's kind of a trade-off. It's a push your luck. It allows you to give a card to the enemy, essentially, to gain 2 cards, or I should say 1 card from each of the decks, but 2 cards total, which again is going to add to the variation of different combinations you can put together to try to solve the ordeal. So this is definitely a push your luck kind of style approach. This one's a little bit more strategic and probably less painful. So this is the one you'll probably want to go after, maybe more so more often than not. Whereas this one's going to have a ripple effect that'll come back to bite you. But as you're trying to typically succeed at ordeals rather than fail them, you're going to be using this and these different tactics as much as you can, because the ripple effects of failing an ordeal can actually be pretty nasty. Now inside of TTS, once you're done an ordeal, it's actually very easy to clean things up. You're simply just going to group up the Arcana cards and you're going to put them on top of the Arcana deck and give them a shuffle. And then over here, you can actually, instead of putting these cards back in like that, you can actually right click on the decks themselves and just hit reset. It'll just bring the cards back and give them a shuffle. And you could of course shuffle them again if you feel like it, but that's it. And we can now go to the success pass and see what it says. Whether it is pity, divine providence, or the devil's malice that holds the rebel leader back, he cannot say. However, his hesitation almost cost him his life. Locking eyes with the archer, the wolf reacts and attacks him, but is hit before being able to strike. The wound is inflicted on the ribs, but it is enough to give you the breach you need. At a fast pace, you set out to run from the beast. We gain a treasure card, which I'll find the treasure deck, which is just right up here. We also get to place region card 002, which is going to come from this deck right here. And it's called Hill of Virtue. We're going to place it in position B1. Here's a look at the treasure card that I just got. It is a consumable one. It has an instant reaction. When a champion at any range is about to suffer a wound, you discard this card to block that wound, but they still take damage as usual. This is something that will tie in during the confrontation phase. So for now, we're just going to place this over here in this watermarked area over here to place treasure. And then of course, I've already gone ahead and placed number 2 limbo card in B1. We'll flip it over and we got Hill of Virtue. So you run to the hill, escaping from the remaining beasts that keep chasing after you. Cornered, you take the high ground and turn your backs to each other, forming a defensive circle. Get away, vile creatures, the voice of the 5th person commands, its owner miraculously appearing among the four of you. He is tall, with a firm face, a strong nose, and wearing a red robe. On his head, a laurel wreath adorns his cap. Greetings, I am Dante, and I will be your guide through this blessed journey that is about to begin. The figure introduces himself as the famous Florentine poet that you have already heard of. As if they recognize the authority of that man, the predators return to the forest. Come, follow me. Now that we are together, we shall travel as one. Long is the way, so speed up the pace and listen carefully, for I have a lot to say and our time is short. Now, at this point, it instructs us to place the caravan pawn in the region. This is the caravan pawn right here, so we're going to place it in this region. And from now on, this is going to be the pawn used to represent you as you travel through the pass of Inferno. The caravan represents all the players participating in the session, but when you're playing solo, it's for your party, and so is if you're playing multiplayer. All decisions made during the game are collective, no player controls, unless, of course, you're playing solo. And at this point, we're going to place region card 003, Infernal Gates, into position B2, which is right beside it. And we are also going to advance the caravan and inspect it. So this caravan is moving into the Infernal Gates. Card looks like this. Still confused, you follow the poet down a road that descends into the haze. Very little of the path can be seen, but a gigantic stone gate just ahead. What is taking place, comrades, is sacrilege. An army of knights has invaded these lands. Who knows why? Dante explains. His stare, however, takes in each of the countless pale and naked figures that pass you by, wandering aimlessly. They do not seem to be dangerous, but your guide is terrified. We must find and confront them before the damage of this audacious assault is irreversible. To that end, our first task is to confer with Minos, who should have stopped them, but did not, the poet concludes as you arrive at your destination. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, is written in flames on the entrance to the Inferno, advising you to keep distance from the only place where you must go. We're now going to place card 004, which is the shortest card, on position B3, move the caravan, and inspect it. All right, so we'll grab card number 4, placing it in slot B3. It looks like this. We're moving our caravan into it, and we'll go to that entry to inspect it. It says, crossing the Infernal Gates, you walk to the bank of a calm river where many more of those wanderers return waist deep in the water. Oh, see who awaits on the banks once more, a gray boatman with eyes blazing like embers provokes. His rowing brings him to you slowly. The one who embarked alive, not dead. This time 4 souls keep him company. For the right price, I shall take you all. He offers the service he does for eternity. Charon the ferryman, Dante salutes, but you sense some enmity. Why do these souls return? They return for they have not been damned, therefore they are free. Now either board or leave. My duty is to lead the souls, not to question the judge's decisions, the grumpy ferryman concludes, leaving you with a choice to make. So we have 3 options here. We can pay the toll, we can take the pass of the indolent, or we can threaten the ferryman. Now I'm actually going to be a little bit crazy. I'm going to go for the path probably less traveled with the threatening vibe. You can see here you can only do this one if you happen to have as a caravan this particular findings card. Now I'm not sure if this is a misprint or not, but I got a card that does match that terminology over here, but it is a treasure card, so I don't believe that this actually matches that unless that findings portion is incorrect, because the findings deck is actually down here and this is not a findings card. So I'm going to assume that I do not have what it is referring to. I'm going to go with threaten the ferryman. So it's going to take us to this entry right here. As you ponder, you conclude that perhaps there is a different solution to the crossing problem, one that the old rower might not be too fond of. Miserable ferryman, the devotee blusters, her eyes shining. For a moment, you think that, like Charon's, they too had burst into flames. What value does silver have in this place? Leave your wicked and heathen ways and take us willingly, for it is in his name we travel. She speaks with conviction about what she can only suppose, trying to force a bargain. So in this case, we have to do an ordeal. This one allows us to use aggressiveness, prowess, or willpower, so all of our attributes if we wish. We have a difficulty 4 this time around, so let's go ahead and set this up. So this is a difficulty 4 ordeal, as you know, so we need to cover up 4 of the Arcana cards, and then we get 4 of each of the different types of cards we get from the Diligence deck and the Providence deck in order to try to make this happen. So we got ourselves a 1, a 14, a 16, an 8, and a 13. Let's see what we get for the value of our hand here. We got a lot to work with potentially. We might be able to pull something off here. We don't have too many high value cards, and it's actually looking like some of these aren't going to pair all that well for the 16. Unfortunately, I think only an 8 would help there. 7 would help here. We don't have either of those on the red side. So the 16 is going to be hard to get to, if not impossible. The 14 here is definitely doable unless we don't have the right cards, which it doesn't look like we... Oh, no, we do. We can do an 8 and a 6. We could do a 4 and a 3 here for the 1, just to keep the high value cards for these ones. Can we string this together? I think we can. We could go here for the 13, and then this is going to be 12, but that's not going to work out for either one of these. So the question is, can we rejig this in any way to make it work? We don't necessarily need, this is a little more flexible on this one, but does that help us? Not really. Not really. Ugh, we needed like a 2 there. No, that's not going to work. So I think we've got 3 regardless. 3 is our best case scenario. So the question we have now is, do we want to burn one of the tokens because we're able to use any of these 3 because they're all part of the test as it mentioned in the book. If we choose to burn one of these tokens, then we can actually take as many of these cards away as we want and get new cards off the top and hope that we can use our cards to solve this and get 4 of them covered. And I don't have to consider these cards I placed on top of to be locked in yet. Like nothing's locked until until you get to the point of saying that you've either succeeded or you choose to fail because you just choose not to go any further because you may not have the resources to be able to do that mitigation of these Arcana cards, or you don't want to offer any cards up to the boss in the confrontation phase in order to draw additional cards from here. So I might do the drawing thing because that actually might be more beneficial. The only downside is I've got to offer something up, and I'm not really a big fan of doing that because that feels like it's going to come back to bite me. But I think because it's a difficulty, well, I don't know. Should I try one? Should I try one resource flip to see whether or not I can get the values I want before I offer something up? Let's do it. Let's do 1. Let's go ahead and take these. We're going to put them in the discard. We're going to drop 2 more cards. We're going to hope that we get... Okay, actually works out perfect. Oh my gosh, that is rare because like when you look at the cards, you've got 7 and 5, 2 is an option, and then of course 12 is an option. So like, in terms of getting the number in the top left that you need to correspond to that, it's actually pretty tough. So we pulled it off somehow, which is awesome. So we succeed right there, and I didn't even need to offer anything up. So I'm really glad I even tried that. So that makes me really happy. So at this point now we're just going to clean up. So I'm going to essentially just reset these decks. Which is very easy to do in Tabletop Simulator. Just showing you guys this. Flip these over, group them up, and we'll drop them back on top of the deck. Flip these over, add them in, and we're going to do some shuffling to make sure that they're ready for the next time we use them. Her firmness reminds the poet of the stance that Virgil took on his own journey. When the ferryman refused to make his crossing, pleased, Dante does not intervene, and to everyone's surprise, her order is carried out. Arg, if you come by order of the high power, I cannot complain, Sharon mutters. Come aboard, all of you, quickly. The crossing is fast, but I am always late. The gray-haired old man hurries. You hardly fit in the small rowboat, even though it holds up well to the new weight. A few moments later, you dock on the other side and continue your journey. The caravan's now going to take the oppressor treasure cards. We're going to find that. We're going to grab the region card 007 Castle Gates, putting it in B4, advance the caravan to it, and inspect it. We'll take limbo card number 7, which is the Castle Gates. We're placing it right here in B4, and we're going to move the caravan to it. We also picked up that Oppressor Treasure. It's a trait. For each wound that an attack you make inflicts, you receive 1 Invigorate. We're going to place this over with our other treasure. So as you can see, when you go through the Chronicle, depending on your decisions and how things pan out through the narrative, how well you do with the ordeals, that sort of thing, different paths are going to open up, some are going to close up. So for instance, we've already jumped to 7 at this point, went from 4 here to 7. So we're not going to see, I'm assuming, 5 and 6. But those would be alternate paths that if you replayed this, you could check out in the future by doing things differently. So we're at the Castle Gates. It says, taking the road from the wharf at the banks of the Acheron, if I'm saying that correctly, you arrive at the gates of a wall so sturdy that even those of Constantinople are not as tall. There are 7 levels to these curtain walls which surround Limbo, Dante comments when he notices your amazed stare. Here we follow to the Bailey, home of those who are good in nature but did not come to know Christ. That is, they were not baptized, he explains. So it means that just living a virtuous life is not enough to be saved. The artist lets out the words that weigh heavily on her. This feels wrong, does it not? She fears she has blasphemed. Yours is a fair question. Worry not. His love being the true guide which the spirits of men need, not even the highest soul would ever find fulfillment far from him, any more than one can quench thirst by drinking wine alone, the poet patiently explains. Now it says right here, place the region card 008, Limbo Bailey, in position B5. We're advancing the caravan to it and inspecting it. So we'll go right into this deck here. I'll do a quick search. And we're going to grab card number 8, if I've got the right one, which is this one right here. Flipping it over, and this is going to go in B5. Did I say B8? I don't know if I did. Maybe I did. So that's right here. And we're going to inspect this one. Keeping the pace, you arrive at the bailey so wide that it could be even mistaken for a meadow. Here, many buildings can be seen through the mist. In one of them, a Greco-Roman amphitheater. Virgil himself welcomes you. I'm afraid Minos has locked himself in his mansion and refuses to receive visitors. The high poet delivers disturbing news when he hears of your venture. The reason for there being so many wandering souls is clear, though. The judge is not on duty. He is so recluse that he commissioned none other than Julius Caesar to guard his gates. Virgil, however, has advice. Do not give in, Dante. Remember Saladin? Perhaps he can be of help. Furthermore, some mortals camped to the north. You could have a word with them. He also proves to be a good guide. Finally, you could still head to Minos Manor. The Roman is a diplomat, and you could explain the case to him. It talks about all or more right here as well. You can read, and of course gives us multiple options. But the key thing to see here is that at this point in time, we're going to take the path cards, which are numbered 1 through 3, which comes from this path deck right here. We're going to place them on the region that we're currently in. And then from now on, whenever the caravan inspects one of these cards, you choose the card, you take it, proceed to the resolution, and then you kind of come back. And at the very end, once you've gone through all of the path options, there's 3 of them, then you'll go to the final resolution at 008D. So the path cards have been placed in the location that I'm currently in. I just moved my caravan token off the side for now, but these are the 3 things we can interact with. And then of course, once we can't interact with A, B, or C, we go to D instead inside the Chronicle book. So we can go visit Saladin, we can investigate the camp, or we can go to the gates of the Minos Manor. So I'm thinking that I'm going to probably investigate the camp, I think, to start. So let's go ahead and take this card. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm just going to place this over here for now. It might have a different location that is, yes, it's right here, actually, after you resolve it. So it's going to go into this location right here. And we're going to come over to B, and it's investigating the camp right here. You head north towards the raiders' camp. This time, only a few souls cross your path. As strange as that may seem, you are worried about the absence of disarray. I do not understand. The outlaw makes conversation as he chews a straw. Camp? Where are the jailers of the Inferno? Why does everyone do what they want? He inquires, intrigued. Your indignation is just, but the truth is that I do not know for sure. Apparently not all those who were convicted to be in this place are capable or willing to react. The very nature of limbo instigates them to apathy, to indifference. Or rather, that is what I want to believe, Dante attempts to explain, fearing that the real answer is that no one cares anymore. Now it says here to place region card 12, the Limbo Camp, in position A5 and advance the caravan to it and inspect it. All right, so we got card number 12 right here, the Limbo Camp, and we're going to place our caravan on it as we move there. So you can see I've interacted with that card, placed it off to the side. We've gone to Limbo Camp entry in the book here. And it says, after a brief walk, you arrive at the place that was described to you. Tents hastily built behind palisades of what dark wood could be found in Limbo. A column of smoke contrasts with the haze and indicates a presence there. Distracted by your inspection of the danger just ahead, you barely notice the one coming from behind. A battalion of soldiers wearing plate armor and unknown tabards attack you unceremoniously. The caravan endures an ordeal of aggressiveness and prowess. Difficulty 3. So you can see this is the first time where we can't use all 3. We can only use aggressiveness and prowess now if we decide to discard a token, and we're going after difficulty 3. We're heading into a difficulty 3 ordeal, so we need to cover 3 Arcana cards up in order to succeed at this. We took 3 cards from each of the major 2 decks here, Diligence and Providence. We can use aggressiveness and we can use prowess in order to mitigate these 5 cards right here. Or, of course, we can also go ahead and offer one of the cards up to end up in the confrontation phase and on the boss, and that will give us an additional card from each deck if we want to go that route. So we have some options to mitigate things depending on how it goes. We got 14, 11, 17, 4, and 12. Let's see what we have for end of cards. Okay, going to play some games on me, and what do we got here? Well, we have the ability to get a 6 and a 5 right here, so that's nice. We have an ability to get, oh, I thought we saw a 10 for a second. I got excited. We do have the ability to get a 4 here. Do we actually have this? We are very close. Can I pull this off? Keep these a little more flexible, and then we can look at these 3 and go, do we want to turf these 3 for one of these tokens? I should say turf all 3 of these for one of these tokens. It has to be aggressiveness or prowess. That might be beneficial. It also might be good to offer something up. to get additional cards in here. So I pass this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Temperance be the one I offer up. Is that the right call? No, let's keep that. I have even numbers, so let's get rid of the odd. That'll. I don't know if that's going to work out or not. I mean, it really hinges on what I get from here. Oh my gosh, I got it. It worked out just like that. We have successfully gone through here. It says, however, the attackers misjudged the situation. Even though you were ambushed, your technical superiority prevails. The survivors run into the mist, thus ending the battle. The victory, however, is a little celebrated. Dante urges you to move forward, and only now do you realize his heart must be heavy, judging by his expression. Is this the way? With iron and blood? The artist whispers to him, but the answer does not come. It says here to replace the region card 12 for 13 called Fallen Garrison and advance the caravan to it and inspect it. I found Limbo card number 13 inside of the deck, got it over here. It is worth mentioning in the TTS simulator, it's a good idea to use the L key to lock cards in position as you put them out across here. So just if you're moving things around, that they don't actually move when you pick stuff up. You don't maybe not lock the cards and the caravan, but the actual cards for the different locations slotted in can be really nice to just have slotted down. So just hit L on each of those. That'll lock them in place. We're going to swap this one out. So this one here, Limbo Camp, is going to have Fallen Garrison on top of it now. We'll lock that in place, bring the caravan over, and we're going to inspect it. And it states here, moving forward, you find the settlement lies undefended. You expect another battle. Suspicious, since last time you were surprised. What you find, though, is a dozen ill soldiers on improvised stretchers. The ambush was aimed to hide the fact that the undertaking is also costing the invaders. Wait, a man who seems tired, wearing blood-stained garments, comes towards you. Honorable souls, I beg you, take what you want, but spare those men. All they have now is their own lives, which are now under my care. He is Hippocrates, patron of medicine. As Dante introduces him, I swore before all the goddesses and gods to use my craft for good. These men are no longer a threat, your host pleads, but can you trust him? So we have a choice here to spare them or not to. And I'm going to actually choose to go down the slaying of the wounded soldiers result. We're going to go a little aggressive on this one. It says, Hippocrates' devotion is memorable, but you do not want to risk having to meet these men once again. I promise it will be quick and painless. The mercenary takes on the heinous task while the outlaw contains your host. As much care as they may receive, many will succumb or be abandoned, and the lucky few who survive may leave, or they may ambush us just ahead. The Florentine's frown makes it clear that he disagrees. After all, the task is as important as it is virtuous. What sort of people will you have become at the end if you follow this path? Once this is done, the artist takes a blood-stained letter from the hands of a soldier as a memento, shortly after he had held it to his heart. It states the caravan takes the merciless treasure card and the blood-stained letter discovery card. Here is a look at the two cards I just gained. This one is a trait card down below. Whenever a single attack you made inflicts 2 or more wounds against the same malefactor, the malefactor suffers an additional wound. So it's going to be really good when we go up against the boss in the future. Go ahead and place that over here in their treasure. And then this one is the first discovery card we've ever gotten. It says, The Moving Confessions of a Dying Man. It says that any time during the Chronicle phase, the caravan can consult a specific appendix entry called the Knight's Letter. So this is really cool. We'll place this over here. And then it states, if we had the Limbo map, which we do not, it's a discovery card. It's in here. We don't have it. We'd proceed to 013C, which is right here. Otherwise, we proceed to Resolution 13D. We're going there down at the bottom. Once the terrible gesture is accomplished, you search the place before you return. The outlaw examines their provisions and equipment while the artist and the poet are busy comforting the desolate Hippocrates. Your compassion is admirable, sister. The devotee approaches the artist, who is in tears because of a letter she found. But do not let your determination fade, for we are here by his will. Her sermon is brief and assertive. He knew, the wanderer lets out. He wrote about the stab to the right of the heart. She points to the wound beneath the bandages. In the end, they are made of flesh, bones, and fear, just like us. Dante gives them a minute, and then he reminds them of the urgency of their journey. The devotee is right about one thing: it is best not to succumb to the melancholy in this place. At this point, we're going to advance the caravan to region 008, Limbo Bailey, and then inspect it. So we finished up at the garrison up here. We've come back down to Limbo Bailey. We've got 2 other path options at our disposal. We'll go to this top one here to visit Saladin. So we need to go to entry 8A in the book, which I've skipped back to. And here it says, Julius Caesar's success in defending the city of Alesia made him a powerful man and an expert in sieges. Few strategists can match him, but if we were to point to someone, Saladin is certainly one of them. The Sultan became famous for his success in the Third Crusade fighting the Christians, commanded by the one who would become the Lionheart. The Ayyubid was great on the battlefield, but it was his cordiality that built his reputation. Dante praises the ruler who recovered Jerusalem from the Crusaders. Careful, poet, speaking of the man like that, sharp tongues would even say that you secretly admire him, the outlaw teases, but his tone is that of mockery. At this point, it says, following constrained steps, you move forward. You place region card number 10 in position C5, and we're going to go to it. So let's find that card right now. We're heading down this way. Number 10 going into C5. We'll flip it over. We'll move ourselves into this location to inspect it. And we're going to go to number 10 in order to find this. And we've got it right here. The House of Ayyubid is a palace built to live up to Saladin's reputation. Vaults, tiles, gardens filled with apricot trees, and a fountain from which pours perhaps the only pure water in the Inferno decorate the palace. To invade the mansion is impossible. There are no men or weapons that could do this. The Sultan concludes as you talk. However, not all victories are achieved on the battlefield. The architect who designed the fortress lives to the east. He must know its escape tunnels. He offers as a solution. You are satisfied, but your host has something else to share. Wait, it seems that he has provided us with a second path. I saw a patrol of knights to the west just now, but it didn't recognize their coat of arms. Perhaps they are the men you seek. So it says here, after you meet Saladin, two paths seem to be promising. So the caravan has to make a decision. We can either visit a workshop or we can pursue the night patrol. I'm going to go ahead and pursue the night patrol. You take the opportunity to confront the invaders and start looking for them in the surrounding area. Following the trail of the smoke, you find the soldiers with their armor relaxed, chattering absently around the campfire, not far from the house of Ayyubid. One of them even holds a wooden desk on his lap full of papyrus. Cartographers, the outlaw whispers as you stealthily watch. They are mapping the region. This is not just a raid. They are here to stay. And that is all the mercenary needs to hear to spring into action. At this point, we're doing an ordeal, aggressiveness, and prowess, difficulty 3. The prowess here will be updated in the future to be blue as well. All right, difficulty 3. Let's see what we have for the Arcana cards. We got an 18, a 2, a 3, a 10, and a 20. Ugh, 20s are rough. Do we have a... No. Okay, so... Can we get up to that kind of level numbers-wise? Yikes, we don't really have good combinations off the start in terms of adding, that's for sure. Not all roads are destroyed just yet, but it's not looking all that promising either. This is actually a really bad mix of cards for these ones, I think. Overall, it's actually pretty terrible. What might be a good strategy here, I mean, there's a few I can get here and there, but it's not a lot. So because of that, it's kind of worth almost turfing all of them and going for another set completely. I almost want to let the entirety of this row go, but maybe keep the 3. Yeah, I think I will. So I'm going to use prowess. I'm going to turf this one, this one, this one, and this one. I'm going to drop some new cards. This token should be gone, by the way, because it was on 1, and when I used it, it would just go right in here, so it's gone. What do we got here? Okay, that's a little bit more doable. So if we do the 3 here, this here, that there, we have a 4, 6. Could also do this here, and minus 4, 6. Doesn't really help me anywhere else. Oh no, it does. Never mind, I'm blind. This is what I was trying to do. Yep, got it. On pursuing the knights. So it says, driven by the mercenaries' recklessness, you take advantage of the knights' slackness and jump at them while they're off guard. They try to react, but the fight was decided before it even started. Dante, however, keeps his distance. He does not condone violence, even though he knows that on this journey he will have to learn to deal with it. As you do not aim to distress the poet any further, you accept victory without chasing the men, making do with the loot they left behind. We get the Limbo Map Discovery card. That is this card right here. It says if the caravan discovers a way to better interpret this map in the Chronicle phase, it is possible that a secret will be revealed. Very cool. Okay, and then it says down here, time is short and the caravan needs to take the next step. The caravan has a bloodstained letter, which it does. Proceed to Resolution 13C. Reading between the lines. At first glance, the letter seems like nothing more than a soldier's confession. However, the artist has grown accustomed to reading between the lines and discovers what was said without being said. These are not the last words of a dying man, she approaches the poet, the only one who could understand her. You see, Dante, it is the alphabet of the salves, but the words are not, or are the ones, but the words are the ones my relatives and I use. When he speaks of the lion, he does not mean his wound. He speaks of someone called Lionheart. Her eyes glisten as the plot unravels. Infected by euphoria, the Florentine opens the map and traces a route. If Lionheart is King Richard, the sword that stabbed him is Saladin, which means that in the east, he turns to all of you. Eureka! The cavern discovers a blood-stained letter and the limbo map discovery cards, which we already have. So we already have those. And then we're going to go ahead and place 15 Plato's Cave, if I'm saying that correctly, in C6, and we advance there. All right, so at this point we got 15 in place. We'll go ahead and flip it over. There is the cave. We're going to move to it to inspect it. And just before we actually go ahead and inspect this, I do want to, just for fun, I'm going to show you what this actually shows in the appendix on page 35. I'm going to see if it's there. And here it is on page 35. This again comes from the bloodstained letter card, the discovery card that we got. Here is the letter that we can actually check out at any point in time in the appendix area. So you can choose to pause the screen right now if you want to read this. At this point, we'll go back to where we are currently inspecting. Following the clues you found, you arrive at a waterfall shrouded in mist. There behind the water curtain, you find a cave where a prisoner is sitting, his back to the entrance, Daedalus. The inventor is startled by your shadow projected on the wall, but the poet soon asks him to turn around. You are friends. The mortals have imprisoned me, for I know the woman who came with them is an imposter, he explains while being released. Justice is blind, Dante says, reflecting on how the judge could have been tricked. If a path to the court is what you seek, I can help you. There is a path deep into the mountains which leads to the old drunk's cellar. I built it myself, and no one else knows about it. He points to a passage in the rock. The caravan takes the imposter exposed discovery card, and we proceed to resolution 15A, which is just below. So we got our imposter exposed card here. Discovery has a little bit of flavor text in there. When the opportunity arises in the confrontation phase, the caravan can try to reason with Minos. That's interesting. So we're going to go ahead and place this over here, giving us another potential thing we can do. I'm kind of placing them out of the area, but that's just because I want to actually, be able to see them at all times, because I might actually forget about certain effects. But for now, we'll stack them all in there. We're going to go down here. It says, guided by this individual, you venture through the labyrinth of corridors of stone walls. You follow the subtle chalk stripes you can find from time to time, an instruction that prevents you from getting lost. Sometime later, you emerge in the infernal judge's cellar. Minos' manner is impressive. Dante makes a point of explaining to you that it was not here on his first trip, nor were the other buildings you visited in Limbo. Only the city of Dis had houses and walls. Apparently, the damned have received or allowed themselves to be given privileges that are not part of the divine order. In fact, it is past time to confront the judge and understand what is happening here, because he has also benefited from this disorder. The Chronicle phase ends here. Carefully follow the instructions on the page. So at this point, what ends up happening is we now move out of this. You can see it's called the transition phase. This is going to be where you're going to be managing everything that just happened, all the things that you just had, where to place them, what to do with them, and how to store them, essentially. So once you're done with this narrative chronicle, you're going to place certain things aside, and then inside the TTS, you don't have to do that. You're just going to go ahead and click Setup Circle or Cycle 1 Confrontation Phase, and it's going to take you straight to it and pre-populate everything for you. So we're going to dive into that right now. So let's head into Circle 1 Confrontation Phase, and here it is loading up on Tabletop Simulator. So you'll see all the assets loading in, and the important things to note is that some of the cards coming from the Chronicle phase have pulled over, so you'll need to deal with those before you get into the Confrontation phase itself. We'll talk about those in a second, but we also have all of our champions across the board here. So as you can see, we have the artist, we have the mercenary, and again, these all tie back to the story that we just read in the Chronicle phase. All these champions laid out here, and they're in their full modes of play. In other words, they have a deck that corresponds to them, and you'll be using that deck in these slots as you go through the gameplay. Now, it's worth mentioning inside of this, as a solo player, you might be going, well, I don't want to control 4 full characters. That might be too much to start things off. And if you're learning the game, you might actually, as a solo player, want to streamline things. So if you want to do that, you right-click on this actual mat, and you're going to go to the state number 2. And this is going to load in the ability to actually manage multiple characters in a more streamlined fashion, which essentially gets rid of their decks. That's the major benefit you get. Now, the card itself is going to go into these different slots along the bottom. So for instance, the mercenary would go here. And if you wanted to control, one in a streamlined fashion, you could set it up like this and still control 3 as full characters. Or you could start to say, you know what, I want to do 3 streamlined and 1 full character. And then you really don't need much of what's going on over here, except for just the weapons that tie to those characters, which are just placed above. Now, I'll go ahead and set this up fully in a moment, but I want to talk about just on the other side of these cards. You'll see this is where, when you do them in a streamlined fashion, it basically builds out all their abilities on their cards rather than banking on what's going on with their maneuver deck. So in this case, we've got everything all set up, but I do need to make a couple adjustments around these dashboards to clean things up. So we'll come back in a second. We're going to go ahead and play with 1 full character and 3 streamlined characters so we can move through the gameplay of the Confrontation at a quicker pace. I can show you more of what's going on in this and explain how this all works. At this point, you can now see the setup for 1 fully controlled character as well as 3 that are more streamlined. So the decks are gone. And the other major thing to mention is the tokens specific to those individuals are also gone, minus the inspired token here, which we will use as we go along if we happen to gain it. Now, there's a bunch of abilities underneath each of these. So all of these are covered up to start things off. You'll see the vigor value, which is essentially their endurance level, their health. It's currently at 6 for all of them across the board. Same over here. And we have a deck of cards, which we're going to end up drawing 4 out of and placing along the bottom here when we start things off. So I'll do that in a moment, as there's a couple more things we need to do first as we transition to the Confrontation phase. So in this transition, we're also going to look at these cards right here. We're going to seat these cards, whether they're on their characters or they're going to actually go into the deck of the boss we'll be going up against, which I'll be talking about in a moment. Before we deal with those cards, I do want to mention something around the streamlined champions that we are using. They are known as companions. You can see here how you set them up. It also breaks down the card in terms of the different portions of it, and also tells us we need readiness tokens rather than the typical tokens you've seen on the full-size characters. So what we'll be doing is grabbing some of those readiness tokens from this bag right here, and you'll see that they are double-sided, but you just need the checkmark side. These tokens can be removed. So for right now, we just need a single readiness token for each one of these characters, as when we choose one of these 3 abilities on their card to actually use, we'll go ahead and place that on top to say we've used it. And of course, difference with these characters in terms of taking wounds is that this will flip over and will be a wound token that is going to sit on top of one of the abilities. We'll talk more about that later on, but you can get wound cards on the full characters that will block up a slot. So they work in a similar fashion, but again, these companions are more streamlined. So that's going to do it in terms of the companion setup. Now I've also pulled down the cards that we had up here that were treasure cards coming from the phase prior, and now through the transition phase we need to actually assign these cards to different individuals as we wish. So we can take a look at the actual abilities on each of the cards and see which ones pair best with which champion. So I placed the cards across my characters. Let's talk about this first. And now on the full character, you'll see spots for each thing. And you have an area here for weapons. You have an area here for relics. You have an area here for traits and consumables. So the consumable I gave the artist is sitting right here. It's a treasure. It's a reaction. When a champion at any range is about to suffer a wound, I can discard this card to block that wound, but they still take the damage as usual. Should be nice. Again, the actual characters have their own passive abilities that you want to keep an eye on when you're actually using them. Over here, we have a couple cards that got placed in. These ones are traits. Now, even though the companions only show these symbols currently in the prototype version, I imagine in the final version they'll end up showing all 4 of these, because I believe the companions can use those cards as well, and I actually know they can. So simply just place these cards either above or around this board. So I've got the oppressor trait on the mercenary. I think that's going to jive with him really well, seeing as he's a melee character that wants to be very aggressive up close. And of course, that's going to allow him to invigorate. So if he is overly aggressive, he can actually bring back some of his vigor, which would be good. And then over here, the outlaw is also fairly aggressive, but from range. And I shouldn't say fairly, he is aggressive from range, but this will allow him to put even more damage on the malefactor. Now that's what the enemy we're going up against is called by default, is the malefactor. And we also have, not only with this, we have him sitting up here in his throne room, and we're not going to turn him because where he's facing actually matters, and I'll talk more about that later. But I'm going to go ahead and turn these individuals so you can see them more clearly as we go through the play. Now, the other thing to mention is not only are we going up against this boss, but there's also a throne up here, way up on top of some buildings. And we'll talk about how this whole area works in a bit. But essentially in this tray right here, we have the ability to see a number of things, and this is going to also help us when we get to the particular phase where we deal with a malefactor. It's going to work from left to right across these decks, so we're going to have one for the malefactor, one for the throne, and then an event card that's going to come into play. Now, if you're new to this confrontation, you're probably going to want to try tutorial first, and you're going up against Minos, and the deck is right here. You're going up against a throne. The throne itself has its own set of cards, and you'll see the sturdiness values on this card. And of course, if you decide to uptick the value of the difficulty from tutorial to normal, those values start to increase. Why does this matter? Well, when you start rolling dice to get hits, you're going to need to at least meet this threshold, this sturdiness value, in order to inflict a wound. So the higher these values are, the harder it is to actually get a wound against the enemy. So we're going to stick with normal for now, but basically I'll show this when we actually start rolling dice. But essentially, let's say I rolled 4 hits, then I'd be able to come over to the deck for the corresponding individual that I hit and take a card off of it. And this deck is going to actually be the total of the life that enemy you're going up against is. So 25 right here. If we actually do a wound against it, we take a card and place it right here. And of course, if we happen to roll some special icons on this die, you'll see right here, these ones are fumbles. And if we actually on a die roll get 2 fumbles, then we have to do a counter attack instead. I'll show you how that works when we actually hit it, because we most definitely will. And then of course, the throne here has 3 health in terms of taking the throne out. So that's another aspect of the strategy here, is we could go after the throne before him, or we could go after him solely and not worry about the throne. But as you might expect, the throne is probably going to be beneficial to the king, and it's not going to be a good idea maybe to let that thing sit around too long, as he'll try to make use of it. At this point, we're going to probably read this to start things off, but before we do that, there is one thing that ties into his deck, and that is over here. Remember when we offered up a card, one of these Arcana cards? Well, this card now actually gets placed into his deck, so now you can see the tie-in from the Chronicle phase in terms of how it bumps up his overall health, because now he has 26 cards we have to churn through, and of course, you're going to go ahead and shuffle this deck because you have no idea where it's going to get buried in the deck. So at this point, it's probably a good idea to talk about the win and loss conditions, so you have an understanding of how we could lose this. Basically, if one of our champions goes down fully with 3 wounds, so you'll see these slots here on the full character champion boards. If these get clogged up by wound cards, which will end up in one of these slots and remove one of these tokens, these are going to clog this up, and once you have 3, that champion is downed and you lose the confrontation. So that's for the full characters, and for these ones over here, you just flip these tokens over and you're going to be placing them on the different abilities, and once they're all full, that's going to knock out that character, and again, it's a loss. So as soon as one of the champions is down, whether it's the companions or it's the full character control over here, that's going to be a loss. And now in terms of winning things, we just need to get through this deck. We need to make sure that the king is taken out. Once he has no more cards in his deck, then we win. Now let's find out a little bit more about the king. We have some flavor text here to read. Minos, the judge of hell. You arrive at the court at last, where Greek columns rise to a ceiling covered with mist and stars, as if it were the Cretan night. The judge of hell awaits, sitting on his throne atop a long staircase. From where you stand, you can barely see the tale whose knots pronounce the sentence of the damned. There, mortals, you have put on such an act in order to draw my attention, have you not? Well, here I am. But know this, I am furious. You have interrupted my nuptial nights, which have been delayed for more than 2 millennia. The former king snarls, his thundering voice emerging from his massive bulk. It is at this point you notice a woman who sneaks out from the back, and everything falls into place. Minos did not rebel, not completely. He just allowed himself to consummate his marriage, and apparently not even the devil wanted to interfere. Nuptial nights, the poet expresses in indignation. Forgive me, your majesty and excellency, but in the name of the high power I beg, end your delights and return to the throne. Your court's recess has left the damned so lost that some have even returned through the dark forest. As you know well, it's Easter in the mortal world. The last thing men need is 100 supposed messiahs. Dante argues with reason, fearful for the souls that can find their bodies again through the door that Christ opened. May the high power forgive me, but 7 nights are my right, and 7 nights I shall have. And you, poet, unless you wish me to straighten that crooked nose of yours, I suggest you turn around with your people and do not bother me any longer. The host seems relentless. The Florentine thinks of counter-arguing, but you have your weapons in hand already, certain that this hearing has ended. Now here's a look at the confrontation phase at a high level. If you want to see how this thing flows and operates, you can pause the screen and read it, but I will show you that the major steps that you go through during this is a cleanup step, a rebuild step, and a preparation step. Of course, you're not going to have to worry much about the cleanup step at the very beginning, but there's a couple things we need to do, and then the rebuild step and preparation step will flow through as we go. And of course, you have the malefactor's turn at the very end, and then the round starts over again. Now, the cool thing to note about this one is that you can do actions between the characters characters interchangeably. So you don't have to activate a character and do everything fully to exhaustion and then move to the next character. You can do one action with the artist, one action with the mercenary, and kind of go back and forth, allowing you to do a lot of synergies between the characters, and that gives you a lot of strategy on this game board. Now, very similar to what we did with the companions, where we gave them one readiness token, allowing them to do one thing on their board, we have to come over here to the full character and remove one of these warm-up tokens, because what's going to happen is every round, we are going to end up getting a new readiness token added to the companions, and over here, we're going to take away one of the warm-up tokens, as there's almost like a cooldown mechanic to be able to fully fight and using all of what we have available for our characters. So you start off being limited in terms of what you can do, and by the third round, you have now kind of opened up everything and you can start going crazy. So we're going to come over here, we're going to draw 4 cards so we know exactly what we have, and we're going to flip those over into the hand because the artist is being played in full control, and you'll see different maneuver cards coming up here for the artist that we can play into these empty slots. And as I mentioned before, if we start getting wounds or even sin cards, and when I mentioned about losing the game from the wound side of the equation, you can also lose by having sins played in a similar manner that will take up slots in here. Now, in terms of how they work, they're different, but in terms of what they do when they go on the board, when you gain them, they still block up one of the slots, which can lead to a loss. So not only can those wounds be tricky, but the sins can also do the exact same thing. But essentially, these empty spots on this game board are going to be, used for maneuver cards, and hopefully you're going to be doing everything you can to avoid wounds and sins clogging them up, as that will give you a loss if it does fully clog up one of the champions. Now let's quickly go over the game board itself. You're going to see how this works as we go along, but the essence of this game is going to allow you to do different actions. Whether you're using maneuver cards, you can do basic actions, and you can do free actions. So you're going to have things that are free, and free things will be things like consumables. So for instance, it'll even mention on it in most cases whether it's actually free to do. So if you see that terminology on the card itself, you'll be able to take that ability and use it. Basic actions are going to fall into things like movement, for instance. If you want to move around the game board, you can spend your vigor in order to get a point of movement. In terms of how movement works on the board, you can see all 4 of our characters are sitting inside of this area tile here. There's a central location that is only used by the actual boss. It will move from space to space across the game board, and it's only ever going to move in an orthogonal nature. Same with the heroes. You're not going to be moving diagonal. You can get to a diagonal position, but you'll have to pay an additional point of movement to get there. Now, the cool thing around movement is when you pay 1 vigor, for instance, with a devotee, I could potentially move to multiple locations because of the way movement works, and it's very dynamic. I like it a lot. You have this one tile you're on. So if you spend 1 vigor, you can actually move to any orthogonally adjacent tile in any of the 4 spaces, so long as it doesn't have an element of terrain in it, like a pillar or another friendly unit, or of course anything else that's part of the gameplay, like maybe up here you have the arc. These things you can actually search in order to find finding cards, which are basically like treasure you're going to find in this area to help you out. So you can go into empty spaces essentially. So if I wanted to move from here, I have the ability to go into this for 1 vigor. I could go here, I could go here, or here. I could come over here on the stairs, here or here. I could come over here on these sets of stairs or over here. And then down here, I've got these 3 options. So with 1 vigor, you have a ton of options strategically to place your character around the game board. Now, it's also worth mentioning you can spend a vigor to just shuffle within the tile you're in. So if you happen to be in here and you just want to kind of move to a different position, let's say you're trying to get to the back of this king because you really want to do a more powerful attack against him, you can simply spend a vigor to just get around behind him if he happened to be sitting right here and he was facing this way. Now, how he is facing is going to matter. Currently, he is facing this way, and we'll talk more about this later on, but I'll give you a general understanding because it's really not complex. You're going to look at the arc of where he's facing. So he's facing this way. You're going to see the lines coming along the game board here. That is going to show that he is facing towards the heroes currently. And so that is important for gameplay purposes, and there'll be multiple times where he might be flipped around in a different position. And then of course he's only caring about things that are within his line of sight, but the game will specifically tell you when to turn him. There's nothing inside the game that you have to worry about turning on your own unless he actually gets hit from behind. So if you happen to get up behind him and you make a hit against him, say he's turned like this, after you make the hit against him and get the benefit of doing a kind of a surprise attack against him, he will turn around. So that's the only time you're going to have to remember to actually flip him on your own. Other than that, the gameplay itself will explicitly state when he is going to change and face different things. So if we wanted to get up on top of this for 1 vigor, I could actually get, and let's use the devotee in this case, we can move the devotee for 1 vigor to any of these 4 locations. I'd probably put her on the stairs as I'm trying to traverse up here. You have to go across the stairs to get up to the level 1. The only way that you can actually get around this is if you happen to have a keyword called climb, and that will allow you to go up the side of one of these buildings. But typically, you got to use the stairs just like you would in real life, unless you have something special that you can avoid that with. So it would cost me 2 vigor to get the devotee up here. And again, when you come up with a 2nd vigor, you can choose any of these available spots to go into, and then you can interact with this if you want to after that. And you don't have to be on it, because you're not allowed to be on it, and you don't have to be adjacent to it. You just have to be on the tile itself to interact with this. Now, as you can see in the rulebook, it breaks down what a basic action is and what a free action is. We already talked about free actions. They're really inherent because they're typically consumables. They're typically written right on the cards themselves that you're actually referencing. So those are easy. Basic actions are going to be things like moving, like we just talked about in terms of moving orthogonally and it costing 1 point of vigor in order to do it. Some of the different champions have special abilities. I believe the Outlaw has something where it can move even further than the regular 1 point of movement, and so it can get a little bit further away quite quickly. And then we have the interact, which is what I actually just mentioned when I said you can actually get up to one of these tiles and interact with the arc in order to go to the findings deck and find something there. So if we choose to interact, that's also a basic action, and it's talked about right here in the rulebook. To sum things up, basic actions like moving and interacting will always cost a point of vigor to do so, unless of course you have some kind of ability that allows you to do it for free. And so at this point, what I want to talk about is falling damage. So if you have a character that's actually 1 level up on a building and something happens, let's say the boss is up here and actually pushes this individual over the edge of the building. If they fall 1 level, they're going to take 2 damage, and they're going to take 2 damage for every single level that they're up. So if they're falling from up here, they're going to drop and they're going to land and take 4 damage, which is pretty rough. Now, it's going to work differently for the actual boss. If the boss happens to be up here and you do an attack that allows it to be pushed over the edge or moved over the edge, then the boss is actually going to take a look at the 2 damage that's being given to him, take a look at the sturdiness value, and if it's not equal to the sturdiness value or exceeding it, there's going to be nothing wound-wise that's going to happen. So knocking the boss off of this edge at level 1 is going to do nothing, but if we knock the boss off of this highest perch down below, it will in fact inflict a wound. So we've talked about some of the terrain, but not all of it. You'll also notice down here in the bottom right, there's 2 more arcs. So we have them on all 4 corners in terms of being able to go and interact with them and try to get a findings card out of them. You'll also notice a bunch of pillars, and they have varying heights. These ones over here are all level 1. These ones are over here are level 2. Basically, when these things fall over, level 2s are going to block up 2 spaces when they're down, and level 1s will block up just a single space. You as a character can be in a space with one of these, and a really good example would be the Outlaw, who's got nice advantages to being a ranged character, and then on top of the advantage of if he happens to interact in a tile with a pillar, he can actually hop on top of it and he can go ahead and make shots. Now, this is something that all of these characters can do in terms of getting up on top of these and getting an advantage, but the Outlaw has range, and so it's a real good advantage for him to be up in those spaces to make attacks. But these pillars can be used in a way, and the thing they have to remember is that, of course, if the boss happens to hit the pillar in some way, shape, or form and you're up there, well, there's a potential for fall damage. So it's kind of a risky thing. You're up there, you get the advantage on the attack, but you could get knocked right off it. Now, it also mentions right in the rule book that when you interact with one of the pillars, it doesn't matter if it's a level 1 or a level 2, your character can get up on top of it. Again, the only thing to keep in mind is the fall damage is going to increase if it gets taken down and you're up on top. So keep that in mind. But when you're interacting and on top of one of these pillars, you're going to gain high ground, which is this ability right here, and decoy is also here as well. So these are 2 things you benefit by being up there. And of course, there might be more gameplay aspects to spin off of this. Now, something that ties directly in with what's going on in this game board here is the fierceness track. You'll see it right here up top, and you'll see the Outlaws in the furthest right position closest to the boss card itself. And it's worth mentioning, this position is the highest fierceness value, which essentially is like aggro. So as you go through the gameplay, there'll be certain things that will tell you to increase. So if it says that we need to increase the mercenaries' fierceness by 1, we'll go ahead and bump it up. And of course, that's going to drop the other token down. And you'll be managing this as you go along. This is going to help break ties and help put a focus on which of the champions that the enemies are really going after. So we'll put it back to what it was, but you'll see how this operates once we actually get into gameplay, but it is very important. All right, it's now time to dive into gameplay. Let's talk about the caravan's turn. The cleanup step, very straightforward. We're going to clean up everything on the full character boards as well as any tokens, readiness tokens off the companions. Don't have to worry about that right now because we are in the first round, so we'll skip past this. Now, we're going to come over here to the rebuild step. This is an important one. I'll quickly go over this, but you'll see this later on. Essentially, as you're drawing cards, as I've already done, 4 cards out for my full character. As you use them and they go into these slots, they'll end up in a discard pile. And then, of course, when you have to rebuild your hand of cards to get up to 4 again, you may not have anything left in the maneuver deck when you're doing this. If you don't, you have to rebuild your deck. And if you go through this step, this is not free, as it mentions right here. What's going to happen is you're going to actually take a sin card, and it's going to represent a negative influence the Inferno is going to exert on the bodies and spirits. And as I mentioned earlier, the sin cards and the wound cards are leading you towards a loss. So every single time you have to replenish, or I should say rebuild your deck for the full characters you're controlling, that is going to be a negative. You'll be drawing a card right here and plopping it right on your dashboard. So you're going to want to be smart with how you're using your maneuver cards. Of course, you'll only be limited by how many slots you have available to start. But it is worth mentioning, if you happen to get a wound, let's say you have this open from the very beginning in the first round, you get a wound. If you place a wound card in this slot here, it would actually get rid of the token that's underneath of it. And if you can find a way to get rid of the wound, you actually can open up that slot a little bit quicker. So that's kind of a little bit of strategy there. But besides that, rebuild step really doesn't have much for us right now. So we're going to head into the next one. Now we head into the preparation step, and I've already done half of this already because I wanted to show you just how to kind of set up the game boards to get going. But in the preparation step is the official time frame when if you have warm-up tokens, you remove one of them, or if you need a readiness token, another one for the companions, you would give one to them. So that's worth mentioning. I've already done this because it's the very first round. We have one readiness token for each companion, and we've taken away one of the warm-up tokens for the full character that we're controlling. So the other thing that happens now is each champion is going to invigorate 3, and that's going to actually have their vigor go up by 3, so everybody's going from 6 to 9. It's a nice boost at the beginning of every single round and something you're certainly not going to want to forget about. As I mentioned earlier on, at this point you're going to start taking actions. And again, you can take free actions, you can take basic actions, or you can play maneuver cards. And you can do any of these things one at a time. So you could play a maneuver card with one of your champions, then go over and do a basic action with a different one. There is no rhyme or reason. It's all up to you based on the strategy you're trying to employ. Maybe positioning matters. You need to get people into certain positions to make something actually chain and pull off correctly. But you have full ability to synergize between all the abilities and actions you can potentially do to pull something off. That's very cool. This is one of the aspects of the game I really like, in that you don't have to fully resolve a character, as I mentioned earlier. You can just go action by action. So at this point, we have full will to do anything we want. So we can take a look across all of our abilities and see what the best combination we can pull off would be. I'm going to start off with the mercenary. I want to get to the flank of not the king just yet. I want to go after the throne because I know that the throne has only 3 cards in here. So if we can actually get 3 wounds against this thing, we can take out the throne and remove that as something that can hurt us later on. So what I'm going to do is have the mercenary move into this tile, then this tile, and then all the way up to here. It's going to cost 3 vigor to do so. He's going to go 1 into this area, 2 into this area, and 3 here. And I'm going to place him right behind the throne like so. This is going to cost me 3 vigor, so we'll go ahead and drop ourselves from 9 down to 6. And I'm going to choose to go ahead and use a readiness token right on this traversal swing. It says restriction, you need to be attacking your target's flank, and you make a melee attack with a +3 dice bonus. Now, something you'll notice right on the card I just activated is there's this symbol right here. This is the fierceness level. This is how much I'm going to increase the fierceness of the mercenary on the track over here. So I'm going to find the mercenary, and the mercenary is in position number 2. It's going to go up 1, so now it is the fiercest of the characters. The aggro is fully focused on him. He's behind here, and now we're going to roll some dice. Now, if we take a look at what he has to add to this roll, he gets an attack value of 3 dice from his greatsword. Also, he gets +3 dice from the bonus here. His oppressor says for each wound that an attack you make inflicts, you receive an invigorate. So for however many wounds I can pull off here, I can actually invigorate myself and bring my energy back up, which is nice. So we're going to have 6 dice going into this. You're going to see the very first rolls we tried to swing and hit this throne, which should be very interesting. Let's see how we do. Wow, what an incredible roll. So right off the hop here, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a perfect situation here. You'll see over here that the throne has this level of defense at 6. So with 8 hits, we are going to get a clean hit against this throne. So we take 1 off the top and place it here. We only have 2 more health to go. Now it's worth mentioning, if this particular die had this symbol on it, and we got 2 of these in our roll, then that is going to be what triggers a counterattack. If we happen to have a counterattack, I'll show you how it works, but essentially this triggers a counterattack, and even worse, if there's more, these are called fumbles. So if you have 2 or more fumbles, you're going to have a counterattack. If you have any additional fumbles beyond the 2, it's going to increase the base damage coming off of that counterattack. So things get even nastier. As our mercenary has the oppressor trait, and I said for each wound that we get to invigorate 1. We're going to go up here on the vigor track, which is awesome. And we have to choose what we want to do next. I'm going to decide to go with the outlaw next. I think the outlaw is going to go ahead and move here into this tile and then move into this tile. And then we're going to interact to get up on top of this pillar. So that's going to be a total of 1 vigor, 2 vigor, and 3 to get up on top. So we'll spend that vigor right now, dropping it down. And after that move, I'm going to come over here to the devotee. I think that this could be interesting. It says here, you or another champion that is up to 2 areas away receive invigorate 3. The next attack that they make this turn receives provision, which is awesome. So this actually, if I go with this one for the devotee, it's going to increase her on the track. So she is going to go up 1 space. And then what's going to happen is we're going to invigorate the outlaw, as that's what I'm choosing to do. It has to be 2 areas away, which they absolutely are. 2 areas away from each other. Devotee's right here. The outlaw's right here, so that works. And then he's going to gain precision, which is a really nice thing to have, especially when he's going to do an attack next. And I think I'm going to be going after that, for sure going after the throne again. So let's go ahead and choose. We could do a ranged attack with a 3 die bonus. We have to have a range of 3 to make this ranged attack work. 1, 2, 3. So we absolutely can shoot up there to the throne. So we'll probably do that. And I think that's the best one. Next attack you make this turn, receive the 3 die bonus. Then you can invigorate 2 a number of times. I don't think that's going to be necessary because I got the invigoration here from the devotee. So I don't need this one right now. So I think this top one is good enough. So that's going to give us a nice bump. As you'll remember, I have precision with this upcoming attack here by the outlaw, thanks to the devotee giving it to me. Precision attacks invest in accuracy rather than strength. So when an attack is precision, the champion does not make an attack roll like normal. Instead, they treat each die they would roll as a hit. So 1 hit each. So if they were to roll 6 dice, which they're going to get 6 hits instead. And guess what? If we don't have to do any kind of rolling, there's no chance for a counterattack. And 6 is exactly what we need to make a hit against the limbo throne. As we know, we're going to get 3 off the longbow and 3 off the power shot. So just like that, we're able to take 1 of the cards off the top, and we are 1 away from dealing with the throne. Now, one thing I did forget to do was to increase the outlaw's fierceness by 2 based on the attack I chose, which just moves the outlaw to the very top position. Now we'll head over to the artist here, and I think I'm going to use this maneuver card right here called Performance. This one says copy a maneuver of your choice that is on another champion's board or that belongs to a companion. And we've got 3 of those. It will apply the same effects and generate the same fierceness. If the copied maneuver instructs you to make an attack, consider that you're using the weapon that belongs to the owner of the maneuver instead of your own. So we won't be using the dagger. If I choose to use this, I'm going to be doing something that these individuals have done, and copying the outlaw might not be a bad idea, as I'll get 6 dice. Now, I won't have precision with this one, which was really nice. The devotee gave the outlaw that ability, but this time I'd be rolling 6 dice, but that gives me the opportunity to potentially pull off getting this card. Now, I still have to go ahead here. It says X because I have to go based off the fierceness value of the power shot. So 2 is going to bump up the artist by 2 over here. So we'll go ahead and move her up the track. So the artist is doing a performance of the outlaw's attack, but does not get precision, as I came from the devotee, strictly to the outlaw for that 1 attack. So here we go, 6 dice, rolling them off, see what we get. We got ourselves, we got a nice hit here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. What a massive hit. And that's it. That's going to be enough to take that 3rd card off. We did this impressively. Now, let's say hypothetically we'd have gotten a fumble here. So a 2nd fumble would have caused this card to go on top first, and it would be a counterattack. So it would actually flip over. We would resolve the different things on this card, and then this card would get taken and flipped back onto the deck if we didn't have enough hits to take it out. If we do have enough hits to take it out, then it would stay out and we would be done with the throne. But either way, we had everything we needed in order to take that 1 card. So we got it. The throne is gone. So we're going to simply take the throne and chuck it. It is no longer part of the equation, which is good news for us. And it's one less thing that's going to trigger when we get around to the enemy side of the equation in their phase, which is coming up very soon. So 1 less deck we have to worry about. So we'll take these cards and actually just remove them off to the side as well. So now we'll only have the king to deal with and the event cards. Pretty awesome. So before we end off our round of play here, I might actually take some basic actions with characters to kind of get them move into some of these arc crates over here. So I might take the devotee and go 1 And then we'll go 2 up here and 3 to interact with this. So let's go over to the devotee. We'll drop her down to 6. And this is good because remember, we're going to replenish 3 on our upcoming round, but we still have to deal, of course, with all the enemy fun that'll come. But this will allow me to interact with the arc, so I'll take that off. We're going to grab a Findings deck card, and we got ourselves Mark of Indolence. And this one is a consumable reaction. When a malefactor in this area is about to counterattack, discard this card to cancel it. You receive 2. That's actually a really good one to have. So we're going to place this one over here for the devotee. That'll be very beneficial. And I just want to make sure I didn't mess that up. So 1, 2, and then interaction is 3, which I paid correctly. Artist is going to go 1 and 2 to get up here, and then 3 to interact with this arc. And we're going to find out what the artist gets. And the artist is going to find and this is a consumable. This one says Waters. It's a consumable as a free action. Discard this card to receive 1 restore. I don't know. I think I'm going to keep this. In this case, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I only get to have 1 card in each of these slots. So I have to choose which one I want to discard out of these 2. I don't think I like the new one. I think I prefer this one still. So we'll let that one go. But that is going to be it for those 2 pieces of furniture. Now, it's also worth noting that furniture can also be used in different creative ways. There are abilities on some of these cards allow to literally pick up furniture and throw it. So one is the mercenary could actually, there has to be furniture with his area or with in his area, and then you can throw the furniture in his area at the malefactor up to 2 areas away, dealing damage. So we could also look at these ones over here and go, you know what, let's not actually try to get the findings card from them. Let's try to use them against the big king himself. So there's multiple ways to use things in here. So those, furniture items are not just kind of a one-trick pony in terms of getting something out of them. There's other things you can do within this environment that you'd be surprised about. One of the plays that I got a card where I had the ability to create sinkholes where the levels of these buildings would actually drop down, which of course would cause falling damage and also change and impact the actual layout of the game. And of course we know, and we'll probably see very soon, that the king gets aggressive running around and can smash over pillars and interact with the terrain that way as well. So each and every one of these confrontations are going to be very dynamic. As we move to the malefactor's turn, it's straightforward. As I mentioned before, we're moving through the tray A to C. We no longer have a B, so it's just A and B that we're interacting with. These are some of the rules to keep in mind as you go through these trays. I'll just go ahead and show you as they crop up. But essentially, coming over here to the tray, you're going to always see the objective we're going after. We're trying to defeat the king, and if we do, we can read a specific passage inside the Chronicle book. We also have other potential confrontation objectives that could crop up, and the game will tell us when to implement these. So for now, we don't do anything with these except just reference them throughout the entirety of this confrontation. But we start right here in the first tray, and we have a head-to-head. It says move 3 and approaching the least fierce champion at any range. The least fierce is going to be on the opposite side down here on the left. That is going to be the devotee. So if we come over here, the devotee is over here, and so if he's coming towards him advancing 3, he's going to make it to this position here. Now, unless the card specifically states that he's going to face the least fierce character or champion, he is not going to turn his glare. He's going to stay positioned the way that he is, looking like this. So let's go to the next spot here. It says, if there are any champions in this area, hold them. Hold the least fierce among them. So there isn't. Otherwise, you're going to perform heavyweight, and he's going to restore 1 additional wound, and this action is ended. So we take a look at the heavyweight condition here. It says he's going to restore 1. There's nothing to restore because we haven't hit him yet, so nothing's going to happen there. Then, if there is a pillar on the board, he's going to advance to the area with the farthest among them and holds it. So he's going to find the pillar furthest away and grab it. So based on where he's currently positioned, he's going to be looking at a level 2 pillar and a level 1. He always goes for the level 2 over the level 1. So he's going to move all the way over to here, and he's going to grab this pillar. All right, so he's gone ahead and grabbed the pillar, and he's got that on top of him right now. So at the moment, he's just holding it, and that's where things are going to end, because as it states right here, once he's complete with the heavyweight here, he's going to hold it, which he's got it, and it states right here, after you perform that, he's going to restore an additional wound. He doesn't have any to restore. The action is ended, so we're done with this, and now this card that we've just resolved is going to go to the bottom of his deck, and the next one is sitting here waiting for us. Now we're going to go to the event deck, as we don't have a throne anymore. We're going to draw this off the top and see what we get. This event is called Open Season. If the throne of Limbo has not yet been destroyed, he's going to advance to it and sit on it. He occupies the central space of the furniture. Well, good thing we took it out, because that's not going to happen. Otherwise, he deals 2 damage to each champion, and this event ends for this card. So we basically just saved ourselves some pain there, but we do still get 2 damage to every champion regardless of where they are on the board, so that's kind of nasty. So down to a 7, a 5, a 4, and a 7. So I've gone ahead and taken the pillar that was being held by the king and placed it over here. Anytime someone is holding something, you just place it next to the individual who's actually holding it, and we'll move on. So the malefactor turn is now done. We are back at the caravan step, and as we didn't have to do fully before, we now have the ability to do the actual cleanup step here. So we're going to come over here. We're going to take a look at our cards that we've used. The cards that were sitting in the maneuver area for the full characters go into the discard area. We need to pull back up to 4 cards, so I can draw a card to fill the slot here. And then over here with these characters, our readiness tokens are going to come off, and very soon here, we're going to go ahead and be gaining additional things as we go in. So the cleanup step is done, essentially just dealing with the maneuver cards or the tokens that are placed for the companions. The rebuild step I just started doing as I rebuilt the 4 cards out for the full character. We now head into the preparation step, and inside of this, we're going to start removing things. Which is good news for us because our warm-up is starting to trigger for us, which is nice. As we get additional activation, or I should say actions we can take on these companions. And then over here, we now have 2 slots available to do even more during our turn, so we're warming up in the battle. The next thing we need to do is increase all of our vigor by 3, which is nice. So it's going to go to 10. We're going to go up to 8 here. We're going to go up to 7 here and max out at 9 for the outlaw. Now it's likely a good time to go over these tokens that carried over from the Chronicle phase into the Confrontation phase in terms of what they can actually provide for us now that we have a better understanding as we've gone through a full round of play. So we have 2 aggressiveness and 2 willpower. So if you take a look here, this is what these tokens can be used for during this phase of the game. So as a free action, a champion can discard one of these tokens possessed by the caravan to give a +2 dice bonus and precision to the next attack they make this turn. Very useful. So we got 2 of those, and we also have 2 of the willpower. During the Confrontation phase, as a reaction, a champion can discard one of these tokens to adjust their vigor to 6 the moment they suffer a wound. This doesn't block the wound, but the cool thing about this is typically when you get down to 0 with one of your champions and you take a wound, you're still at 0. So this is a great way to kind of get yourself back up to 6 quite nicely, and it has additional effects down here as well. All right, to start things off, I'm going to have the devotee move down here for 1, then here for 2, and here for 3, and then get up on top of this pillar for 4 to get into position 2 spaces away on purpose. So dropping all the way down to 3, which is a little bit aggressive, but I'm hoping that this will work out in my favor. Now, the outlaw here has a really cool distract here that says it can make a ranged attack with a +2 die bonus. Collateral effect is another champion that's up to 2 areas away, which now the devotee is, from the targeted malefactor, can make an attack with a bonus of +2 dice against them if possible. So very nice. So we're going to go ahead and use this. That's going to have the outlaw go up on the track, but the outlaw is already in the top position, so that's not going to change anything at all. And we're going to go ahead and make that range attack. Has to be at range 3. And where am I currently? I'm way over here. So I've got 1, 2, 3 range to the target. I can do it. So I think what I'm going to do in this situation, being that I'm making this ranged attack with 6 dice, is I'm going to go ahead and use this aggressiveness token, which is going to give me a +2 on my dice, which means I have a total of 8 dice going into it, but it also gives me precision, which means I don't have to roll the die. And so that's an 8-hit attack without any issue whatsoever. So that literally is going to go into the 4 here twice, which means we get to do 2 hits against the enemy with no worries about a counterattack. And check it out, we actually got super lucky. One of the cards that was put into the deck that was later going to come back to bite us just got removed as part of that attack. So that worked out really nicely. Now, on top of this ability that I just pulled off here with the outlaw, I'm also able to now have somebody that's 2 areas away from the target make an attack with an extra 2 dice themselves. And if we take a look at the devotee has a range of 2, so she's within attack range where she currently stands up here, and she's attacking 2 away. She's got 3 here from this area, so she's going to be making an attack of 3, but a +2 gives her a total of 5. So she's rolling 5 dice. I could go ahead and bump this up, but if I use this token, it would only get me to 7, and unless I was, and with precision, that would be 7 hits, which means I would be shy on 1 away from getting 2 wounds, so it's not worth using this token at this point in time, so we'll probably just go ahead with the roll of the dice without that bonus. We only have 1 more time to use that anyway before we have willpower as our last one left over. Let's see if we get lucky enough to be able to pull off one of these attacks here coming from this free ability of the outlaw to the devotee. I hope it ends up being beneficial. Not so much. Okay, so we got ourselves an interesting situation here. Now, we are currently, what does it say here? Once per turn. Actually, I want to check something with the outlaw to make sure I didn't miss something. Whenever a single attack you make inflicts 2 or more wounds, that malefactor suffers an additional wound. So actually, before I go any further, this also comes off. So 3 wounds from that outlaw attack. Let's make sure we're not missing anything else. We could re-roll a die, but we didn't need to because precision, made that not necessary to even work with. Now coming over here, it says once per turn as a free action, you may discard a maneuver card to make a ranged attack with a +1 die bonus. I think that this will be changed in the final version because this only really is beneficial when you're controlling this character as a full character. So I think this ability needs to change or be tweaked to be worded differently to be able to be used when you're as a companion. So nothing gained there. This says when a malefactor in this area is about to counterattack, discard this card to cancel the counterattack, and you can invigorate. So what I could do, which actually might make a lot of sense, is instead of going ahead and dealing with this counterattack, I'm going to choose to cancel it. However, upon further inspection, it does state on the card that it has to be in the same area, and it's not in the same area. It's actually 2 away. So I'm assuming that I cannot use this right now, unfortunately. So I'll have to wait for another time to do that. So this could be pretty nasty. So the counterattack happens first. We got 3, which means counterattack happens with 2 fumbles. The extra 1 just adds to base damage from the card. So now we're going to take this home run card, flip it over, and we get this, and we follow this instruction. So it says, if the king is holding any champions, which he's not, throw the fiercest among them against the furthest pillar at any range, dealing 6 base damage, which would be increased by 1 for every other fumble beyond the 2. So it would actually be 7 damage. And this counterattack is ended, but this isn't going to happen. Otherwise, advance to the area with the attacking champion. So this individual is going to come into this area. And of course, it's going to sit in the center position as that is where it sits. And then it says, hold the fiercest champion in this area, dealing 3 base damage to them. So here's where things get interesting. Inside the pillars section, knowing full well there is a pillar in the area that he just walked into and he wants to try and grab the character, what happens in these situations is that we have a decoy. So when the malefactor would hold or damage this champion because they're in the area, the pillar becomes the target of the effect instead. This pillar is broken or held, regardless of how much damage it received. In the end, the champion will be subject to falling damage. So it is going to be broken, which means it's going to get removed from the game. I'm going to take falling damage, and he's still holding on to the level 2 pillar that is in his hands from my understanding. So this pillar is going to come over here. I'm going to land here, and from falling that long, that's going to be 4. And if I come down here to the devotee, that is actually very bad for me, as I'm going to go down to 0 and going to have to flip over one of my tokens and choose to place it over top of one of these 3, as I've just got my very first wound for a companion. I'm going to choose to have the word of salvation covered up for my wound. And at this point, when you take a wound, if you happen to have one of these willpower tokens, which I do, I'm going to pay 1 in order to actually boost myself from 0 to 6, which will keep me from hopefully getting more wounds quite quickly afterwards. So it'll put me in a little bit better of a position. As you can see, I was a decoy because I was up on top of the pillar. The malefactor tried to hold or damage the champion when they were in the same area. So instead, the pillar is the target, which means the pillar is broken. Regardless of how much damage it received in the end, the champion will be subject to falling damage. So I did the falling damage already, but when broken, any champion standing on it must reposition themselves in the area where the pillar's base is and take fall damage. So I've gone ahead and done that. I've placed my character in the same location. I took the fall damage, but now what happens with the pillar is I need to lay this pillar over into 2 spaces, although it does kind of start talking about placing the pillar in where it occupied itself originally and then sprawling it into a second space from there, but that wouldn't be possible based on the current rules of the game. So I'm not sure whether I have the ability to move my character anywhere in this area, which I don't think would be fair because I could go behind the actual boss. I think I just have to lay this pillar over to block up 2 spaces in here. But I could be wrong because I would believe that the pillar would actually fall from its position where it is into either here or over here. And then I would have the remaining spaces to choose from in terms of where I fell. So I'm going to play it like that. So I'm going to have the pillar kind of fall over in this direction here, if I can make it fall nicely. Yep, blocking up those 2. And I'm going to put myself behind and say that that's a legal placement just based on the fact that it is saying that the pillar needs to be in the first position it was when it fell, plus sprawl into a second one. And that should be beneficial for me later on. But that is going to be that resolved. Now, the only other thing that's going to happen here that it's mentioned on this right here is it says... Otherwise, advance to the area with the attacking champion, which it did. Hold the fiercest champion in this area, dealing 3 base damage to them. So again, when we came over here to try to resolve this, being that it was trying to hold me, it broke the pillar instead, because the pillar becomes the effect of the target. So it used its damage to break the pillar, thankfully, because I was up on top of it, but I took the falling damage. So I do not believe I take the 3 damage that's being talked about on this card, as I was up on the pillar. That's one of the, bonuses to being up high in this case. But the falling damage was not nice because I took 4 there. And of course, it's worth mentioning that if the Malefactor had been able to actually hit me instead of going after the pillar, it wouldn't have been 3 base damage. It would have been 4 because I had the 2 fumbles for the counterattack, but the extra one adds to the base damage. So either way, whether he hits me for 4 or I fall from the top level 2, I was going to take 4 regardless. At this point, now that we resolved the counterattack, we take a look at the hits that we got. We got 3 total, which is not enough to meet the king's sturdiness. So unfortunately, this counterattack card is going to go to the bottom of the deck, and we don't get to remove that one, unfortunately. So if we had had enough hits after resolving the counterattack, that card would stay out in the discard pile, but it does not in this case. Now looking at where things are situated right now, the Outlaw's in a good position. 3 range away, doesn't even have to move, and already has the advantage of the pillar, which ties in really nicely to his longbow, which is quite nice. So what I'm going to do is probably activate the power shot here. And of course, I've got this wonderful trait card here that can inflict even more wounds. So we got 3 from here. We've got 3 for the longsword, so it's going to be a total of 6. Now I could go crazy and flip this again. I think I will. So I'll spend this to bump my dice up by 2 and make it precision. And that is going to be another hit of 3 damage going to this individual with nothing else repercussion-wise coming my way, which is nice. So 1, 2, 3. We got his health down to 20 currently. So pretty solid hit overall. Very powerful. Now, on the opposite side of the equation here, we haven't really done much with the mercenary just yet. The mercenary is really far away and needs to get up close and personal to do something. So if I move him 1, 2, 3, and 4, I could get him into the same space, which I might do. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, and one thing to mention is I didn't actually bump up the Outlaw for that power shot, but I think he's already at the top of the track. Yeah, he is. Don't have to worry about that. And the devotee, I think, was at the bottom. And when she initiated her, I guess she never initiated this. She just got a wound. So nothing changed there. Let's go ahead and have the mercenary move. Maybe 3, 4. Yeah, let's do the full 4. We'll go from 9 down to 5, which is quite a bit of vigor to get moving all the way down to here. And actually, what's kind of fun about this is, well, yeah, I guess I put the devotee in kind of a bad spot, but you can probably do an attack. We're doing more of a flank thing here. What can he do? Whenever you make an attack, you may take a damage to receive +1 die bonus before the roll. And for each wound that an attack you make inflicts, you receive invigorate. That's nice. So which one of these works best for right now? So we can invigorate. The next attack you make receives a bonus 2 dice. This might be it because 1, 2, 3, 4 brings me really high. So that's nice. You need to be attacking your target's flank. Hey, there we go. You make a melee attack with 3 dice. Oh, even better. Maybe this is the right one right now. There must be furniture in the area to throw. I think this traversal swing is the one to do. So we're going to go ahead and bump up the mercenary, one on the track for doing this. And we're going to do this traversal swing. So it's 3 dice plus the 3 dice we have up here. We can take a damage to receive an additional die. Is it worth it if we have 6? Is it worth it to get 7? I don't really know. Don't really think it is, to be honest. No, we're pretty low. Let's not do that. Let's just go with 6 dice and see how much we can kind of pull off from this roll. I also really want to try to avoid getting a counterattack, but we'll see how that goes. Ah, didn't work out, but we did. Oh, we got a really solid hit overall. Oh, so close. Okay, so the counterattack is going to happen, but there'll be no benefit to base damage this time. So we'll go ahead and resolve the counterattack. A little bit scared right now. Arcing Spin. Deal 2 base damage to each champion in the area. That's not good. So that's going to be the devotee and the mercenary taking a smack. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Going back over here. This counterattack deals 2 additional damage to each of the targets for each champion or pillar that he is holding. Now, this is interesting because the rulebook makes it seem like he could only carry either a champion or a pillar, whereas what it's talking about here kind of makes it sound like he could actually, it says dealing 2 additional damage to each of the targets for each champion or pillar he's holding, which makes it sound like he can hold multiple. So I think that clarity might be a little beneficial in the final version. For now, we're just going to say he's holding just the pillar, so he's going to be throwing 2 additional damage for each of the targets, which is even worse. So we're down to 2. And then it's the mercenary, if I'm not mistaken, right up here. Wow, we are very close to taking some serious wounds. So he is not a friendly individual on his counterattacks. If this counterattack did not hit any champions who perform heavyweight, it did. So we're done, I think, at this point, because the second portion here says if the counterattack did not hit any champions who perform heavyweight, otherwise it's going to move 1, distancing itself from the attacking champion. Okay, so that's going to happen. So he's going to distance himself away. So we're going to have him move over to this position right here. Now that we resolved the counterattack, we can actually take a look here at the rest of the hits that we actually put across him. We got a hit of 7, which is enough to get 1 card off. So this card right here will stay. It will not flip over and go back into the deck. So that is how you kind of resolve a counterattack, where you actually have enough hits to keep that counterattack in the discard pile. So you do end up ticking away at him a little bit, but he did a pretty nasty swing to us. Well, if there was ever a time for the devotee to bless people, this would be it. So she's going to go ahead and do that. We're going to bump her up 1 on the track as well. I think she's near the bottom, so she's going up by 1. And she is going to, you are another champion that is up to 2 areas away, receive Invigorate 3. On the next attack, they get precision. So I'm going to probably give that to the mercenary, I think. Yeah, let's give it to the mercenary. So we're going to bump the mercenary 1, 2, 3. Like that, and we've got precision now over here, which is nice. So the question is, do I want to do anything fun with that precision? Well, if I do provoke, this is a good one because I can bump up my bump it up even higher, which would be beneficial. I need to get close to him, so first let's go ahead and move 1 in order to get into the same space as him, and I'm actually going to move right behind him. So even though this pillar looks like it's in the way of this space, it is not. So I'm going to have to do a better job of tilting that one over. Like that, and the mercenary is behind him now, which is nice, and you'll see the benefits of that in a second. And we have precision though, so technically it's going to be a pretty solid hit regardless. We're going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to invigorate ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 7. We get a +2 on the attack, and of course the mercenary is already, actually he's not, now he's moving to the top of the track. And with the 2 he's got here, the 3 he's got here. So we're going into this attack with 5 dice, and I can, when I make an attack, you can take a damage to receive an additional die. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do that in order to bump this up to make it hopefully more beneficial when I pull this off. Let's see how we do. Oh my. Okay, so we do have a counterattack coming in, which is not going to be good, but we are going to be able to get a wound off of it as well. So let's see what we have here. It is tackle. We're going to move to approaching the closest champion at any range. So closest is going to be mercenary, so he's already quite happy to stay where he is. And if there are champions in this area, deal 3 base damage to the fiercest among them. So based on the area that we're in, which we found one, fiercest is going to be the mercenary easily, already at the very top of the track and the only one in there anyway. 3 base damage +1 because we have an additional fumble here. So a total of 4 damage. Is that going to take the mercenary out? No, but wow, that's a good hit. All the way down to 2. And then that champion suffers push 1. So we're going to get pushed away. So we're going to push ourselves back here. And that is going to be the end of that. Now this card stays out. It has been dealt with because as we count this up with 5, it does meet the threshold. So this card will stay out of the deck. We're down to 18 cards and we continue onwards. Let's go ahead with the artist now at this point. I think this could be pretty cool. We're going to go ahead and do a switcheroo to start off. It says you and another champion at any range can switch. You swap position. Then the next attack you make this turn, you get a +2 die bonus. The next attack the champion makes, the other one, receives a 2 die attack bonus. So you're basically giving yourself a little bit of a bonus between 2 people, but the problem is I've already gone ahead and used all of what I can over here. So unfortunately, actually, I shouldn't say that. The devotee does have 1 more readiness token, or should have 1 more readiness token based on having just 1 used right here. So I don't know if this is going to benefit it, but maybe later on it could actually work. We'll see. For now, what I'm going to do is see which one I want to swap with. Let's go ahead and swap with the devotee. So we're going to actually bring the artist down to the devotee spot. like that. Now, when I did this, it's the 1 on the track bumping up for the artist. So we're going to go from the bottom position to the second lowest position. And the reason I did this is so I can get closer to the boss. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to spend 1 vigor in order to get right behind the boss, because I have a really cool advantage with the artist where I get an additional die if I'm fighting to the back of the character. And I'm also getting a +2 off this card too. So now I have +3 right here, plus the 3 from my dagger, which is a lot. And now I could potentially actually push it even further by playing another maneuver card and getting even more out of this. Yeah, let's be a little bit crazy. We're going to put Twin Strike in the second position here. So another 2 up the track is going to put the artist in the very highest position. And we're going to make a melee attack with a +2 die bonus. So +2 here, +2 here, 1 here. That's 5, plus the 3 on the dagger. That is 8. And then this one says whenever you make an attack, if you're attacking your target from behind, you may take 1 damage to add 1 hit after the roll. So I've got a lot going for me here. Let's see how we do with this roll. Oh, what a crazy hit. So we got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Is that, wow. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then 12, 13. We are so close. Well, I guess this is pretty solid. I don't think adding another die in here makes any sense at all. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to take the 3. We're going to chuck this one here is gone. This one here is gone. And this one here is also gone. I'll just flip that one over because it seems like it's holding its spot for some weird reason. And we've got 15 cards in that deck now, which is amazing. What an incredible hit for the artist. Next up, I'm going to choose to have the artist move to and then interact with the chest over here in the corner. So she's going to go 1, 2, come over here, and she's going to go and take this findings card here, see what she's got. She got herself another consumable. As a free action, discard this card to restore 1. I don't know if that's better than this one. I really don't think so. I think this is the one I want to keep still, so this one will get tosses. I think this might be the same one as the one I have over here already, so a duplicate there that time. But we are all done, I think, at this point. I could do movement with these characters, but 2 of them are quite low. I don't really want to push it any further. The Devotee I was able to get over here, which was a nice strategic jump to get, even though I couldn't take advantage of a +2 attack that I gave her from the artist, I was able to get her away from the enemy. And the Mercenary is also quite low. So the Mercenary is what I'm really concerned about, but that's going to do it for the caravan phase. The Malefactor's turn begins. It's an Olympic throw. It says advance to the furthest area that has a small pillar at any range. Okay, so furthest one is going to be this one or this one, as these are the smallest pillars at furthest range from him. So I'm assuming because there's 2, I can choose, as there's no other enemies in this space, to determine using this track over here. So I'm going to place him over here. And then it says, if there's champions in here, they're going to get 4 damage, and then deal additional 4 damage for each object he's holding. So we'd actually throw a ton of damage, but thankfully we're not in that space with a champion. Otherwise, which is what's going to happen because this if statement's not going to happen, perform the heavyweight, and he's going to restore 1 additional wound, and this action is ended. So if I am interpreting things correctly, I believe he's going to go ahead and try to pick up this thing. So what does he do? He's going to restore 1. Then if there's a pillar on the board, he advances to the area with furthest among them and holds it. When the boss does a restore, you're going to take the top card of this deck and you're going to place it at the bottom of this deck. I had to rejig things, which is why this title is different now than what it was moments ago, because you remember when I took a counterattack and then I did 3 damage afterwards, the 3 damage I did afterwards ended up going underneath the counterattack card, so I had to readjust what card was actually on top. So this card is going to go, regardless of what happened in that situation, when you're playing the game, the top card of the deck here will be the one that gets placed on the bottom of the pile, and it basically just restores some of his health a little bit. Now at this point, he's going to move to the area with the furthest pillar, and he's going to hold it. So he's way over here. There's a pillar over here leaning over, so he's going to go all the way over to here, and he's going to take this pillar. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, it's sounding more and more like he can take multiple things, and I'm going to have that clarified later on, but it appears like he does do this. Now, in terms of where he's facing, face the fiercest champion at any range. Okay, so the fiercest champion at any range is going to be the artist, and the artist is where? The artist was way over here. So we're going to be making sure we're turning and looking this way. So the first time that it's actually saying to face, and I don't think that actually changes orientation. I think that was his regular orientation anyway. So it's facing off this way, which is good. and then throw a pillar that is in this area against the face champion, dealing 6 damage to them. The pillars replaced collapsed. So he takes one of the 2 pillars he was holding and he fires it at the artist, throwing it. It lays over in the space, and this individual is going to take 6 damage. Do we have that? Oh, that's not good. That gets us all the way down to a wound. Now let's take a look at this. It says here, consumable when a champion at any range is about to suffer a wound, discard this card to block the wound, but they still take the damage. So we will use this to stop a wound card from coming in. Now, if a wound card did come in and we didn't have this consumable to spend, what would happen is this wound card would go right on top of this and remove that token. But for right now, we're okay. We're down to 0. And what I'm going to do is immediately use the last willpower here in order to boost myself back up to 6. And the final thing that's going to happen is the champion's going to push 1 if they have not suffered a wound. And actually, because I use a consumable to avoid the wound, I technically didn't get one. Now, as a push in this situation with the artist has her up against the wall, she's going to get collision damage of 2. So she's going to take that 2 hit right now. And that's going to resolve the Olympic throw, which is now going to be placed on the bottom of the deck. And we're going to move on to the event card right here. And this one says dramatic entrance. The champion who has the least wounds or sin cards on their board suffers polymorph. If 2 or more champions are tied, the least fierce among them suffers this effect. Details of this transformation are found in the keyword section of the Book of Commandments. It says read entry the Black Widow on page 26, and then store this card after you finish its resolution. As this targets champions with the least wounds or sin cards, it's not going to be the devotee because she has a wound, whereas the outlaw, mercenary, and the artist don't have a wound or sin cards inside of anything going on here. So because of that, it's between these 3, and the next way to determine it is to break the tie by looking at who's the least fierce among them. Looking at the track, the lowest is the devotee, but she's out of the equation for this, but the outlaw is the one that will be dealing with this. So the outlaw is going to polymorph. The rulebook details out how polymorph works and also how to set this all up. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. It's the capybara, which will be coming in to replace the outlaw. So we have the figure here. We also have a deck of cards. It has its own card deck, and it also has its own companion or champion card. So we'll be going ahead and replacing it with the outlaw. So a pretty funny change to have happened to the outlaw. We have this polymorph champion now. It's on this companion side of the card, but if we happen to be playing as a full character, we just flip it over and use this side instead. And no basic actions can be taken with this thing, but you can, of course, go ahead and use your readiness tokens to do abilities to allow you to move and do attacks and things like that. Now, if you want this character who's now, and the outlaw was up here, so that character flipped out with a different standee. If you want to bring the outlaw back and restore the outlaw, essentially when a wound card is placed on their board or companion card, that will trigger the transformation, or when they receive a restore effect, that will also bring them back. So that's how you can kind of get back to your original state. But as of right now, we're working with this. We're now told to read this confrontation scene, the Black Widow. It says, cordiality gives way to blood as you realize that the judge of hell does not intend to do his duty. To the poet's surprise, such a transgression yields no immediate punishment from either side, heaven or hell. Does the Almighty look the other way? Or worse, does the devil? Even though the once king proves to be an excellent warrior, the numbers are in your favor, for you are not mere recruits either. It is at this moment that the cunning woman steps out of the shadows and joins the fight. Her eyes glitter like twin thunderbolts, cackling with supernatural power. Husband, she shouts as she floats a foot off the ground. Her hair waves as if she is a storm personified. Allow me to remove such scum from our manor, for I cannot bear to sit still while they attempt to harm your majesty. Truth be told, you did not expect to face a sorceress. So we're going to place the queen in this specific spot. Her model's going on the game board. And it tells us in the book not only to place the standee here, but also we got these cards. This deck is now in the 3rd position of the tray as well. And the card that was here is gone. So those events are over with. We now have to deal with both these characters. You can see their values here on the card. Hers is over here on the right, the queen, and the king's on the far left. But there is one other thing mentioned here. It says if the caravan has the imposter exposed discovery card, read the additional scene, Confessions of a Dying Man, aside. And then otherwise, nothing special happens. So we actually get to do this. As you'll remember, inside the Chronicle, we were able to expose the imposter and God discovery card, which allows us to have this additional scene. So let's read it. That says, the woman makes an impressive entrance that is undeniable. However, the poet knows that you need to try to make the best out of this moment. Hear me well, your excellency, shouts Dante, drawing Minos' attention. This woman is not your wife. She's an imposter. He takes a dangerous road. She is but a mortal who has learned to draw tremendous power from this place. That is all. She has made a fool of you so her people could come with your blessing. The plot has been exposed, but will a passionate heart give in to conspiracy? Oh, from the look of the king, gives the poet, you can bet yes. Liar, the exposed queen tries to argue. Oh, husband dear, hear no more of these lies. Have I ever been dishonorable in any way? She insists, but the memory that comes to the judge's mind is of a wooden cow built by Daedalus, if I'm saying that correctly. In the end, perhaps you do have a chance. So it states here the caravan discards this discovery card and takes the forced confession objective card, and from now on the caravan has a second opportunity to achieve victory in this encounter, which we wouldn't have had if we hadn't have actually exposed the imposter. So that's pretty awesome. Here is the second objective. We flip it over, and this is another way we can pull it off. So when we can take out the queen, we read this in the Book of Chronicles. So we have two different ways to go about things now. She only has 9 cards, whereas he currently has 16. So we can kind of go either way. And we now head into a brand new round. And at this point, we're going to do some cleanup. So I've already gone ahead and taken all the readiness tokens off of here. Of course, the wound stays. And then over here, we have the cards we've just used in the prior round going into the discard pile. And we have these 2 remaining we need to draw up as we rebuild. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're also going to go ahead and get rid of the last warm-up token going into the 3rd round. So we have even more we can accomplish. And of course, we're also going to go ahead and gain 3 on the track for each one of these individuals. We'll bump all of them up. This one can't go any higher. Now let's talk about a situation here in the rebuild step, and you have 3 cards out, but you need to draw another one to make 4, and you don't have any over here. Well, at that point, you're going to go ahead and flip this entire discard pile, shuffle it up, and you're going to place it over here on the left-hand side. And before you draw from here, you're going to go up to the Sin card deck, and you're going to draw a card, and you're going to place it in your hand. So let's now talk about the strategy of Sin cards. When you get a Sin card in your hand, they're essentially blocking up a slot that you could have otherwise gotten a maneuver card into, so it's bad from that sense. You can typically hold on to 1 in your hand, and it's not so bad. Once you get 2 to 3, it starts getting a little bit wishy-washy in terms of whether it's a good idea or not. The other ways that you can actually deal with these cards is to play them into a maneuver slot. Now, depending on which side of the card you choose to play, it will act differently. So the yield side will be played, and it'll go into a slot similar to a wound. It will count towards the 3 wounds or Sin cards you need in order to have your character be taken out, which means you lose these scenarios. You have to be careful on this one, but it does provide you, in this case, with a reaction, a really powerful thing. It also will adjust the track up here in the top as well, so keep an eye on that. Now, if you choose to use the card for its resist side, you want to resist the Sin versus yield to the Sin, then in this case, things act a little bit differently. You can only resist this Sin if you have not performed any maneuvers this round. You basically play the card in here and you skip your turn essentially, and then you can actually place this card to the bottom of the Sin deck and clear it out. So it does allow you to get rid of the Sin, but then you become a lot less useful. So you have to find that window when that might be the right time to do. You also get to knock yourself down on the track as well. If you're high up on that track already and you want to go to the bottom position, it's very beneficial that way. So those are the ways in which you can mitigate these Sin cards. And again, you're trying to keep them from sitting inside of these slots in your maneuver slots, because the more of these you get on top of wounds, the closer you are to losing. And that, my friends, wraps up the game overview and gameplay video for Dante Inferno from Creative Game Studios. Really hope this helps you get rolling with the Tabletop Simulator experience. And of course, the physical version going to crowdfunding for February 20th on GameFound. If you want to find that, link's in the pinned comment video description. If you want to try this game out in its digital form right now before it goes physical, you can actually check it out by also following a link in the pinned comment and video description for that. Let me know if you have any questions or comments around what you've seen so far. And if there's anything I need to mention in terms of corrections or FYIs, I'll put them in the pinned comment at a later date. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.